Hello and welcome to the Desi EM project. And today I have Richard Smith version 2.0. It's good to have you back on the show, Richard. Looking forward to a chat today.
Absolute pleasure to be here as always. We had an incredible recording last time. Then you came on my show, another
Yeah,
incredible recording. So yeah, I mean this is round three really, 3.0.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
exciting. Looking forward. An interesting topic as well.
Yeah, that was my son also. Today he was like, who are you recording with? And I was like, Richard. Like, oh, this is the third time you guys are meeting. I'm like, yeah, you keeping count. That's nice. Yeah, and then talking about kids. I mean, we discussed this last time. How parents actually normalize junk food for their kids, which is quite sad. What do you have to say about that? Let's get into it.
Do you know it's incredibly frustrating for me as a parent. My little girl is 9 years old. Um, I've gravitated into this lifestyle over the last decade. So I began my journey before she was born, but I was still new to things. So for me, in the early stages, there were still compounds that I was unaware of that was damaging for my little girl. So she's almost gone down this journey of accepting that some of the foods, or non-foods even, that a lot of parents will feed their children. We believed that they were normal things. These compounds are everywhere. You only need to walk down the high street and you see compounds on street corners. And I'm talking, things like chocolate bars or candy bars, soft drinks. And it even goes deeper than this, lots of junk food, but it's normalized now. Unfortunately for me, because I was new to it, I hadn't really understood how detrimental some of these compounds were. And now trying to make a change is more difficult. So, I mean, I've been ketogenic or carnivore for a decade, of which carnivore, 4 to 5 years. I would love my little girl to be carnivore, but it's incredibly difficult. And you and I touched base on this because of external influences also. When they go to school, we can't control what they're fed in school. Not always. When they go over to their friends' houses for tea, or if they go over to, their nans or other relatives' houses, it's difficult to control what foods or non-foods even that they are fed. And I find it heartbreaking because the further that I've gone down this rabbit hole, and I'm sure you can attest to this also, the more aware that I am of how damaging these compounds are. Compounds that shouldn't be in the human diet. Yet, I used to believe that they were incredibly healthy. Trying to make that change for myself is proving difficult, obviously, because she's coming from a background where she was consuming these for much of her younger life. And there's an addiction aspect also. I mean, sugar's a drug. It's more addictive, arguably, than heroin. Certainly as equally as addictive as cocaine. So it's incredibly difficult to remove yourself from the compound. But there's lots of other things going on behind the scene. But I find it heartbreaking when you go places and you go to the playground and you see children constantly running around with sugary treats. They're stopping for candy bars, chocolate bars, sweets, just to give them that boost in order to climb up the next slide or go on the next swing. And I don't think the parents quite understand how damaging these compounds are. And I think that's what I wanted to get into today, is maybe discuss some of these compounds, why they're so damaging, the compounds that are arguably even more damaging that most parents are not aware of, because a lot of parents do try to feed their children a healthy lifestyle. Not all parents give their children candy bars and sweets, but even then, there are compounds, as you and I know, that are absolutely detrimental, and they cause big issues. You and I see this firsthand with the clients that we work with and the patients that we work with. These compounds are deadly, but they've just been normalized within society, and trying to break that, I think, is going to be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen like a boom in the cases and the incidence of things like diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver and obesity in children, which is actually quite sad. I mean, even in India, in rural India, they've done ultrasound scans on kids, where a lot of them actually, like almost 30 to 40%, I don't remember the exact numbers right now, but around 30 to 40% had non-alcoholic fatty liver. And this was in the rural areas. Imagine the numbers that would be there in the urban sectors where they're exposed to more junk food. I think parents don't actually realize how carbohydrates can also be detrimental for the kids, and in the sense, I don't know if they actually know, uh, and I don't think they're actually told or taught this ever, that when you're having a mother's milk, which is about 60 to 70% fat and cholesterol, right, the babies are actually they're actually developing in ketosis, and then we go ahead and break that ketosis by providing carbohydrates to the child once they start eating. We give them rice water, or just rice and bananas and stuff, and they're pushed out of ketosis. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, it's normalized, isn't it? I mean, from most people's perspective, feeding your child a banana or rice would be a healthy option. But they're not. And as you say, I mean, many parents understand that sweets have an impact on oral health. We're told not to eat sweets because they cause cavities and they contain sugar. But what many parents don't understand is that all carbohydrates break down into sugar. Apart from the fiber, which is a subset of carbohydrate, it's non-digestible, but carbohydrates are sugar. And I think it's misleading sometimes because we can look at the back of a packet in our local supermarket and it will say carbohydrates 80 grams per 100, of which sugar's 5. And we think that that's okay because it only contains 5 grams of sugar. But that's a fallacy. What that label is telling us is that 5 grams will sugar immediately for us to use as energy. The rest will store as glycogen, but will turn into glucose through glycogenolysis eventually, and it will become sugar. So all of those carbohydrates are sugar. Carbs equals sugar. We're not designed to consume excessive amounts of sugar. As you rightly say, our natural metabolic state is the metabolic state of ketosis. This is the way that we've evolved almost our entire existence. We're born in the metabolic state of ketosis, and we're weaned off these with artificials that are high in sugar, which is something that we can really get into, I think, in regards to the macronutrient split. But this isn't an evolutionary appropriate diet. And we know this through nitrogen isotope testing, as far as up to 1.5 to 2 million years when we look at Australopithecus. We knew that we weren't just carnivore, we were hyper-carnivore. So this is a fact. When people will argue that we were herbivores or maybe predominantly plant-based, it's a fallacy. Basically, what this nitrogen isotope testing tells us is that for as long as 1.5 to 2 million years, we have been not just carnivore, but hyper-carnivore, which means we would have eaten nothing but animal proteins unless we couldn't find those animal proteins and we needed some form of sustenance, and then we would have consumed vegetables in order to tie us over. But vegetables today don't resemble the vegetables that used to exist. The fruits, they're not the same. These compounds have been hybridized. They've been crossbred in order to produce bigger yields, which means more money for the companies that produce these. And the deeper down the rabbit hole you go, the more confusing these things come in regards to, because we're told to eat 5 a day in the UK. I don't know if that's a thing in India. In fact, it's probably more so looking at your food pyramid and your plate that you presented last time. I know there was barely any protein on there, if
Yeah.
any at all. And in there lies the problem, because every cell in the body is made of protein and fat. It predominates water. About 70% of the weight of the average mammalian cell is water. Out of the 30% remaining, 18, so over half of that 30% is protein, 5% is lipid, and only 2% is polysaccharide. So if we were to look at the nutrients that we consume from our diet, then it makes sense. We need water. We know we need water. The next is protein, where we need protein. We need fat. Carbohydrate or glucose or polysaccharide needs to be a lot lower. It's a small percentage in comparison. Yet, what do? We predominate the carbohydrate. Carbohydrate seems to lead the way. And this leads to all sorts of issues, as you rightly say, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and everything else. I mean, all of these things are connected. Insulin resistance and inflammation are responsible for, almost every metabolic illness and disease that we know of, and more, and beyond this. It's dementia, Parkinson's. All of these things have been connected to insulin resistance of the brain, which has recently been coined type 3 diabetes, isn't it? And we can get into the
Yeah.
mechanisms behind that if you wanted to as well. But it goes a lot deeper, a lot deeper.
Yeah, and it's also a marketing tactic and the narrative, right? I mean, I have this fridge magnet which was sent in by one of the delivery apps over here, and I've kept it for a reason. It just says, "Have you ordered your greens today?" You know, that's the kind of marketing and propaganda that's out there. And I've just kept it like that because I really want to call them up and let them know. You should change this to "Have you ordered your meats today?" Which is so much more important. And the plants are actually not essential to us. I mean, they harm us anyways. We all know that. And that's kind of funny. That's been going on for so many years, where people have been trying to push plants even for kids. I mean, historically, if you see, people have always said, my kids don't like the veggies, and we need to push them to eat the veggies. Maybe not all the kids, but most of the kids that I've ever always heard, be it anywhere where you had to actually push them to have vegetarian food, or their plants, or their broccoli, or whatever. I think it was just their instinct that they don't like to eat those things.
Yeah, it is. They contain plant. So there's levels to this. I think, and we can really get into the weeds in regards to what real food is. I think from a basic level, anything that was once alive or directly hit by sunlight is some form of food. Um, I'm not a fan of veggies, and as you say, every vegetable contains phytoalexins, plant toxins, a defense chemical that plant has to fight off a predator. You and I, or any other animal, can fight back, or we can run away. So that's our defense mechanism. But plants are rooted to the ground, and we are in an evolutionary arms race, if you like, with plants. They're fighting for survival, and we're fighting for survival. The ruminant animals that eat the plants, they eat the plants, and we eat the ruminant animals. This is how we absorb and digest the nutrients that they obtain from the plants that we can't obtain directly, by the way. But all plants contain plant toxins, compounds that will either kill us immediately or can cause issues over time. They're not evolutionary appropriate, but I think when it comes to foods that we feed our children, these are, some of them are slightly less damaging than others, and I think it's a spectrum, and we can get into which are the healthiest, or in fact, let's not say the healthiest, which cause less harm, because they all cause harm. But there's layers to this, isn't there? I mean, we know processed foods are not good for us. We know sugars are not good for us, but then there's that education piece and understanding that all carbs are sugar. We need to understand what damage the sugar causes, and then we need to look at the sources of those sugars, i.e. whether they're coming from greens or grains. Both cause harm, some more than other. And then it leads on to fruit and so they're all in that sort of category. But then the real food, without question, is animal proteins. They quite literally contain every vitamin and mineral that we need, not just to survive, but thrive. But there is certainly a segue to this. And I think what I quite often try to remember is that I'm now carnivore. You were carnivore. We eat nothing but meat, eggs, fish, maybe cheese occasionally, perhaps, animal proteins and natural fats. That is a big step for most people. So I think through education pieces, there are levers to pull. And I think we can make incremental changes towards this, but to tell the average person just to eat a piece of beef or a piece of lamb or some eggs, it's almost a step too far. So there are things that we can do with this. There are levers that we can pull to prepare people, because at the end of the day, this is for the average parent. I think we want to educate all of the parents out there, give them all of the information, and let them pull whichever levers they feel that they need to pull. But I am a big advocate of a meat-based lifestyle. But it's tough, isn't it? We're up against it. We are up against it.
Yeah, I mean, the kids during their developmental phase, they need to have the right proteins, the right amino acids, and the natural fats, because proteins are what builds a body. It's what keeps us standing straight. It's what our bones are made of, our ligaments are made of, all the collagen and everything. Every structure in our body is made of proteins, and the kids actually need that from the right sources. What about formula milk?
Do you know, again, when my little girl was born, I wasn't trained in nutrition. I was new to this way of living, and my little girl was formula fed. And it breaks my heart now knowing, when I look back and look at the list of ingredients, they are
Yeah.
absolutely toxic. Absolutely toxic. And make no bones of it. Yes, there are things in there that contain nutrients, but compared to mother's breast milk, they are absolutely toxic. Lots of toxic chemicals. And we'll name some of these as we go through. I mean, we've got a little presentation to run through also. It's not real food, and there are so many toxic compounds in there. Please do not use formula milk unless you are in a situation in which you cannot breastfeed for whatever reason. Breast milk is one of the most nutrient dense foods on the planet, especially for newborns. And in fact, when we look at the amino acid profile for animal proteins, the amino acid profile and the mineral profile, it seems to be standard across the board with all animal proteins, with the exception of milk and eggs, something that is there to give life to a newborn, or to feed a newborn. And the ratios, there's colostrum in there, there's a lot more calcium, which we don't need as much of as we age, by the way. It is an important compound. It's one of the elements that makes up, one of 6 elements that makes up every cell, or 99% of the cells in the human body. We need lots when we're born, and we need it from mother's breast milk. But as we age, the body needs a lot less of this to perform the same amount of work. That's probably a talk for another day. But nature doesn't make mistakes. Man makes mistakes, and man makes mistakes in man-made chemicals and formulas. So my opinion on formula milk is, don't use it if you don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, I was also quite shocked because we had given it to my son too, and when I read that it had vegetable oils and sugars in it, those were like the first 2 compounds, and that was quite shocking. So, I mean, Rich, you mentioned that you wanted to share a presentation. Why don't we go ahead and start with that and see what you've got, and we'll discuss some points on that.
Brilliant. Yeah. So we'll look. I'm sure there's going to be lots that you can add to this as well, but I'll keep it on that. I won't open it to the big screen because there's some slides on the left that we don't really need to go into. I won't bore you with the first part, which is my journey. But look, let's take it on to this. And this goes well beyond obesity and things. But if we look in the 1950s, the average size of a woman was a size 12, 9 stone 12, and a man was 11 stone 6. In 2023, the average size of a woman and this is across the board. This is metrics from all over the world that I've taken myself and collated together.
Rich, could you explain what stone means? Because some of the listeners won't understand that.
Yes, so basically 9 stone 12 in, and let me get my calculator out. So 9 stone 12 is the weight. If we were to multiply the 9 by 14, because there's 14 pounds, that's 126 plus the 12. So 9 stone 12 is 138 pound. And if we divide that by 2.2, that'll give us the weight in K, so 62.7. And the man
Got it.
11 stone 6 anyway, and I'll go on and I'll do the same equation with the average woman size. So the average size of a woman across the world increased by 4 sizes up to size 16, and then basically from the numbers that we've just given, 11 stone 2 pound is the average. So if we do 11 multiplied by 14, add in the 2 in pounds, that's 156. Divided by 2.2 for the kilograms, that's 70.9. So it's a big increase, and it's the same story with the man. The average size of a man, or weight for the man, was 11 stone 6 pound, now increased to 13.5 stone. And we can see this on the graph. So, what's the problem? When we look at the foods we consume, and this is far more nutrient dense, I believe, than the plate you showed me from India,
Yeah.
recently. But this is predominantly what we're told to consume in the UK. And that is an interpretation across the board from many different things, such as the food pyramid and the eat well plate. But if you see on the left, it predominates carbohydrates. So carbohydrates, proteins, and fats are our macronutrients for the listeners who don't know. Carbs, proteins, and fats. So this is what we consume when we consume our food. Typically, 3 macronutrients, and this is what we're told to consume typically in the UK. The food pyramid, which is different again from your food pyramid, but it does still predominate carbohydrates. So still high in carbohydrates. Moderate protein, but we're told to limit protein. We're told to avoid red meat, and we can get onto this as we go also. And we're told to avoid fat. And the Eat Well plate, which is one of the UK's main sort of guides, if you like, for healthy living, which we've recoined the Eat Badly plate, which I was doing a podcast with Zoe Harcoom, and she coined it, the Eat Badly plate, for many reasons. On this plate, I don't know if you can see there, but in the centre there's a can of cola. There's a can of cola in the centre.
Oh.
No, it's So this was on the original Eat Well plate. This has since been removed. And this is the original. So this is the original Eat Well plate. The original had this on. The new version no longer has it on. But we were told to consume these compounds. We know that Coca-Cola, soft drinks, and things are not good for us. Yet they're on a plate that's meant to be a healthy plate, a healthy way of living. Now, the reason for this, and I don't have this slide on here, but when you look at the companies who are involved, they're all sugar companies and pharmaceutical companies. And why is that, might you ask? And I believe there's a hidden agenda to this, but we can get on to this anyway. Irrespective of this, this is typically what a healthy plate would look like in the UK. And I'd be the first to admit that looks healthy. I look at that plate, and I'm still in the old mindset, from over a decade ago. And I look at that's if I saw someone eating that in a restaurant, that looks healthy. I now know this not to be true. And we can get into the weeds as to why as we go, but that's the food that will be on a so-called healthy plate. These compounds, or non-foods, as I like to call them, are cooked in vegetable oils or seed oils. So we're doing everything that we need to be doing. We're doing everything that we're told to do. So this is fat consumption since the 1900s, over the last decade. And you can see that vegetable oils have increased massively, whereas margarine, lard and butter are lower than ever. We're consuming less of these than ever before. So as far as fat consumption goes, we're told, to lower fat because of the risk of cardiovascular disease, and cholesterol, which is a topic that I know you're very fond of and you've covered many times, and I'm sure you will continue to do so. But we're doing the things that we're told to do. Grains have increased massively, while meats have remained stable. In fact, the bottom graph, the only one across the board that has increased is poultry, which is the lean meats. So this is what we're told to do. We're told to consume the lean meats. We're doing everything that we're told to do, yet all of these illnesses and diseases are higher than ever. They're on a massive upward increase. And I do have those figures somewhere. I'll try to pull those out before the end of this, but it isn't in this presentation. So we're doing everything that we're told to do, but it clearly isn't working. It's not working. And I think the reason for this is that we look at the problem as being a weight issue. And we look at it as a caloric problem, calories in versus calories out. And this is what we're told if we go to the doctor and we're overweight. Lower your calories, track your calories. Well, weight gain isn't to do with calories. It's not to do with calories. Energy needs to be accounted for, but a calorie isn't the best metric to do this. Now, there's another theory, and it's a theory of the endocrine system or our hormones. And what I believe, and I think you'll agree, is that it's predominantly hormone-based, that we gain or lose weight. And again, severe weight gain is directly correlated with ill health. And we know that this is sugar. We know that chocolate bars, candy bars are sugar also. And as we've just already mentioned, things like breads, pastas, rice, cereals, all of these are sugar. Muesli, granola, I used to think were incredibly healthy for me. I used to eat buckets of granola thinking it was incredibly healthy. But it's all carbohydrate. Because as we mentioned earlier, all carbohydrates break down into sugar. And this is the process it goes through. And I will simplify this. So when we consume sugar, the pancreas releases a hormone called insulin. Insulin upregulates this enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, which breaks these bonds on the glycerol backbone, and it sends fatty acids into the fat cell. So it's this elicitation of insulin that has led to fat storage. In fact, we can't store fat without insulin. We need fat to store. We need insulin to store fat. Now, what many of us will do if we're trying to be more active is we'll wake in the morning, we'll consume a bowl of muesli and go for a run. And this is absolutely counterintuitive, because that bowl of muesli, which again is like 80% sugar, as we've already highlighted, that will elicit an insulin response. And when insulin is upregulated, it tells the body to store fat, but it also blocks hormone-sensitive lipase. It blocks that enzyme, hormone-sensitive lipase, which we need to perform this action in reverse, break these bonds on the glycerol backbone to put fatty acids into the bloodstream. So not only does insulin tell the body to store fat, it puts a biological lock in our fat stores, making it almost impossible for us to burn fat. So this is one of the main reasons why weight gain and ill health are endocrine problems. It's because endocrines are our hormones, and insulin is a storing hormone, and it wants to store fat when we elicit that action through the ingestion of glucose. Now, insulin is said to be a driver of glucose into the cells, and that's what it does, but that's not its main job. Its main job is to drive amino acids into cells, and this message has got confused along the way. It isn't there to predominantly push glucose into the cells. It does this to save your life, because if blood glucose, if glucose was to increase too much within the blood, that becomes toxic and we would die. So insulin goes to work to pull this glucose out of circulation and store it in the liver and in the muscle as glycogen in order to save your life. So sugar's a toxin. Yes, the body needs X amount of glucose. The red blood cell needs glucose, and the glutaminergic neurotransmitters in the brain need glucose. But we make glucose. We make glucose naturally through a process called gluconeogenesis. We make glucose through non-glucose substrates like lipid and protein, and we can get into that as we go. But moving on from this, vegetable oils, all of these compounds that we consume on a daily basis contain vegetable oils. We're told to consume seed oils to improve risk of cardiovascular disease, and we're told to avoid saturated fats and so on and so forth. But these compounds are high in an oxidized omega-6 called linoleic acid. Linoleic acid damages the liver, and it leads to more insulin resistance. As a percentage, it's higher even than carbohydrate. And we know this through these studies. So what this study highlights is that a high omega-6 intake is associated with weight gain in both animal and human studies. Omega-6 basically tells the body to store fat. Omega-3s do not do this, and saturated fats do not do this. It's the omega-6s. And as a side note, the omega-6 is also associated with leptin and insulin resistance. So through a similar mechanism, these vegetable seed oils, they also tell the body to store fat. The issue with this is everywhere we go, every corner shop, every supermarket contains these compounds. There's not one food item in this picture. This isn't food. These are frankenfoods, compounds that have been genetically modified and added with all sorts of man-made chemicals to elicit the bliss response and to get us to crave these compounds, to go back and buy more. There's nothing of any nutritional value in there. They're highly toxic and detrimental to health. Now, I think it's safe to say that most parents understand this. So what about those parents who are trying to make healthy choices? What about those parents who are trying to feed their kids, the rice, as you mentioned earlier, the granola, the pasta? The issue with this is grains and other compounds, and we'll get into this, are high in lectins. Lectins are a carbohydrate binding protein. They bind to insulin receptors and signal a 5 times higher response than just carbohydrate or glucose alone, which basically means, in simple terms, if you were to consume a bowl of muesli that contained 500 calories or bacon and eggs that contained 500 calories, the insulin response and potentially the fat storage response could be as much as 5 times higher from the muesli than it would be from the bacon and eggs, which means it can't be a simple calories in, calories out model. So we're breaking that down. Now, one of the mechanisms that is elicited when we consume food is the hormone leptin. Leptin is released. It tells us that we're full. These lectins block leptin. They block our body's ability to tell us that we've eaten. So if we don't receive the correct signaling, this leads to overconsumption. Overconsumption is going to lead to further weight gain. Now, it goes deeper. These grains that we believe are healthy also contain phytic acid as well as lectins. Now, these phytic acids will block the absorption, or can block the absorption, of things like zinc, iron, and magnesium by as much as 100%. Zinc is essential for the production of testosterone, which is needed in both men and women. Iron is important for supplying oxygen to the muscle to aid with building and repairing, and magnesium is crucial for supporting muscle and energy production. So these are things that are essential, and I'll get deeper into these as we go along. But what this study highlights on the right, and this is a famous study that lots of us within this area have seen, that when we co-consume a compound such as oysters, which are very high in zinc, with corn tortillas, the phytic acid is enough to block that zinc by as much as 100%. So it isn't just enough to consume something that's highly nutrient dense. What we co-consume with it has a massive impact on how those nutrients are absorbed. But it gets even worse through a number of mechanisms. So, and forgive my my basic drawing skills, because I've drawn these myself. This is a representation of the microvilli. So the microvilli are little fingers that line the gut, and this is how we absorb our nutrients. So when we consume food, the nutrients, which are the little yellow circles there, they bind to the microvilli, and this is how we absorb our vitamins and minerals. The issue when we consume compounds that contain lectins is lectins are carbohydrate binding proteins. They bind to receptor sites on the microvilli, reducing the surface area. So as you can see now, these nutrients are coming into the system, and they're blocked. The absorption is blocked by these lectins. In this case, it's wheat germ agglutinin, which is found in things like cereal, bread, pasta, rice, breadcrumbs, pizzas, anything that contains grains, flours, so on and so forth, which are compounds that are everywhere. Now, this is the most important thing, and probably the most important thing that I want anyone listening to take away, is the damage that it causes to your gut. The epithelial cells, which are the bottom pieces that the microvilli are on there. So when we consume these lectins, they come in, they bind the epithelial cells lining the gut. They cause the release of a molecule called zonulin. When zonulin is released, it causes a gap to appear in the tight junction between these epithelial cells. Quite literally, this pokes holes in the lining of our gut, which we don't want. This is a bad thing, because this allows undigested proteins to travel into the bloodstream where they shouldn't be. So the body creates antibodies to fight them, to kill them, because they shouldn't be circulating in the blood. So it creates these antibodies, it takes these out of circulation, but then through a process called molecular mimicry, the body then starts attacking other proteins in the body that look the same, human proteins. This is autoimmune disease. Anyone you know who suffers with an autoimmune issue, it comes from intestinal permeability. And in most people, in most cases, it's the lectins that are doing this. The muesli, the cereals, the breads, pastas, rice, the pizzas, the chicken nuggets, so on and so forth. The chicken in the nugget isn't that bad. It is healthier. It probably contains lots of other nasties that they've used to mix that, but fundamentally chicken is healthy. The breadcrumbs are not good for you. And what they're made in are the vegetable oils. So it's this double whammy of a perfect storm, if you like. So these grains, and I'll be the first to admit, I look at these things and I think that's a healthy diet. But we feed grains to cattle to fatten them up. So why would we think that feeding them to man is going to have a different impact? And these are the type of foods. So when I spoke to a teacher at my little girl's local school, this is a representation of the foods that they consume throughout the day. And I was heartbroken. Yes, there's chicken on there, but most of the chicken they fed is covered in breadcrumbs. Not much of the meals that they have is chicken without the breadcrumbs. It's toast for breakfast, beans occasionally, cereals, pastas, potato chips, pizzas, burgers, all of the things that we've just said, which are high in sugar, which again, as you said earlier, leads to this insulin resistance, which are also high in these phytic acids, these lectins, and the vegetable oils. All of these compounds contain these vegetable oils, and we'll get into why that is detrimental as we go. But it gets even worse when it comes to the grains. And I want also any listeners to take this on board, because if you think I'm over exaggerating with a carbohydrate response, then this is going to knock it home well and truly, because grains and other vegetables are treated with a compound, a herbicide called glyphosate. Glyphosate is a herbicide that blocks pathways within the human body. Now, this is a Prop 65 warning, which is issued in California. A Prop 65 warning is put on items that are deemed to cause harm to humans. So, I mean, as it says there, this area contains glyphosate, a chemical known to the state of California to cause cancer, birth defects, and other reproductive harm. So this is a compound that is incredibly dangerous. They spray our crops with this compound and then we eat it. This can't be good for us. And the reason that it can't be good, not just because of all of those issues there, is because it blocks a pathway called the shikimate pathway. Now, the shikimate pathway is how we create our aromatic amino acids, which go on to create our neurotransmitters. And this is my my interpretation of how the glyphosate blocks this pathway. And if you don't believe me, this is a study that highlights this. And basically what this illustrates is that the herbicide glyphosate blocks the shikimate pathway. By doing so, inhibits our ability to create neurotransmitters. Now, neurotransmitters are essential for life. If we don't produce these, we feel depressed and anxious. It leads to all sorts of ill health, even severe psychosis. And I believe this is one of the main root causes, along with insulin resistance and excessive amounts of carbohydrate consumption in regards to severe psychosis and depression, anxiety, lots of mental health issues. Kids these days, you know, they're depressed. That's what my little girl said to me the other day, I'm depressed. I wasn't depressed when I was younger. I was sad. I was happy or I was sad. I was never depressed. Where's this word come from? And I do believe that people overuse these words without understanding. But these compounds that we feed our kids are having detrimental impacts. Now, why is this an issue? And I won't be too much longer with this, Ankur, I promise, and then you can get into this and we can really get into the weeds. But neurotransmitters are things like dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, serotonin, melatonin. These are things that are essential for life, things that make us feel happy or make us feel sad. And again, things like tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine allow us to make these, which we can get from vegetables, but we get in far higher quantities from animal proteins. So these are amino acids that we can obtain from vegetables, but in far higher and more bioavailable from animal proteins. And I'll explain now why to get them from other sources isn't so good. So dopamine. We are hardwired to chase dopamine. When our neurotransmitters are working properly, so when we consume these aromatic amino acids, these functions are elicited naturally and we're happy. We're in a proper fed state. We receive all of the nutrients that we need. We create dopamine and serotonin and so on and so forth. And we feel good. We feel happy. The issue is when we're not happy, we reach for sugar because sugar will give us a dopamine fix. So sugar releases dopamine to the mesolimbic pathway, the reward pathway. Dopamine gives us a pleasure in the same way that drugs do. Sugar increases the amount of dopamine in the brain, but by doing so, it downregulates the dopamine receptor. So basically, every time we consume sugar, we have a dopamine fix. We feel good, but it's short-lived. It doesn't last long, and then it starts to crash. So what do? Well, we reach for more sugar. We go for more, and we have this other little bump. But every time, these bumps are becoming less and less. They're less short-lived, and to achieve the same thing, we eat more sugar, and this is where the addiction comes in. So lots of addiction through. So we elicit this response through sugar, and it's a similar thing with serotonin. So when we consume serotonin, so serotonin is a neurotransmitter that leads to positive sensations. Long periods of stress will produce stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, which can interfere with the synthesis of serotonin, and a deficiency can cause depression, insomnia, and eating disorders. Now, what leads to a high cortisol level? Excessive amounts of sugar. So it's this vicious circle. Now, the other thing with serotonin is that it's created from an amino acid called tryptophan. Tryptophan makes serotonin. In a normal state, we make these neurotransmitters, we're happy and we're good to go. But what happens when we consume sugar is that sugar elicits an insulin response. Insulin will pull all of the amino acids out of circulation except for tryptophan. It leaves tryptophan available for synthesis into serotonin, and we feel good, we feel rewarded. This is why it's another factor in regards to why sugar is addictive, because every time we eat it, it elicits a dopamine response and a serotonin response. It's highly addictive. Now, the issue with obtaining these naturally is that tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine, they need cofactors, things like zinc, iron, vitamin B12, B3, B6, and so on and so forth, in order to create these. Every time we consume those compounds, like we mentioned in the earlier side, that contain phytic acid and lectins, it blocks, remember we said it blocks zinc by as much as 100%. Now we're not producing our neurotransmitters. So now we're going for the sugar, because remember, we're hardwired to chase dopamine and serotonin. So it's a vicious cycle. Now we're consuming these compounds. We're no longer consuming or adequately absorbing those cofactors to make dopamine and serotonin. And our only way to do so then is to consume the sugar. Again, the sugar that we consume blocks the neurotransmitters. It leads to depression, craving. And then it leads to another craving or another urge for this dopamine and serotonin. And the only way to get this is by consuming sugar again. So now we're in a state of addiction. We've been feeding our children these sugars, even things from what we deem to be healthy, as you said, like bananas and rice is sugar, and it can lead to these addictive tendencies. So what can we do? What do we do? Well, we need our aromatic amino acids, tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine, to create these neurotransmitters, but we need the cofactors. So we need animal proteins, and if we are consuming vegetables, then, and as you and I, suggest, ideally don't consume vegetables, but if you are, make them the least part of your plate, a quarter of your plate, which is what I've depicted on there. So predominate animal proteins, and aim for vegetables typically that grow above the ground, or no veg at all. But minimize the amount of vegetables that you consume. Now you're consuming the animal proteins that allow us to make these neurotransmitters. You're not consuming as many of these toxic compounds like the lectins and phytic acids that block the absorption, although vegetables do contain lectins also, and we'll get into this. But now what we've done with this is that we're able to produce our neurotransmitters. But how do we break the cycle is key. What tools can we implement to prevent or to break the cycle? Well, we can increase BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. These are stimulated by saturated fats, omega-3s, vitamin D, which is found in animal proteins, and ketosis, which we get through consuming animal proteins. So how do we do that? Well, we do that by eating animal proteins. Animal proteins contain all of these compounds, and again, predominate animal proteins. Another trick that we can use is by eliciting a response by cholecystokinin. Cholecystokinin is a hormone that tells us that we're full in the same way that lectin does, and by doing so helps blunt cravings. Again, we can elicit this response through saturated fats, omega-3s, and amino acids. Well, how do we do this? It's animal proteins. Everything comes back to these animal proteins. And then there are other levers that we can pull. Melanocyte stimulating hormone. This is elicited through UVA or in UVB, or basically direct sunlight through the eyes. So without wearing sunglasses, basically this means sunlight early in the morning or later in the evening. When the sun is low in the sky, so UVB is low and UVA is higher, this will elicit melanocyte stimulating hormone, which helps us blunt these cravings. So this is how we break this cycle when it comes to our children's food addiction or our own food addiction. And I think if there's only two lessons that you can learn from this, and I do have a few more, but the main two for me, if you can't live an animal-based lifestyle or be carnivore, cut the grains, because the grains are high in these lectins. They contain these phytic acids, which block the absorption of these cofactors that allow us to create neurotransmitters, and the cofactors that allow us to create methylation, by the way, and we haven't even gone into that. These are the two biggest levers, I believe, that we can pull. Cut the grains and drop the vegetable oils. And that's how that would look on your plate. Now, that is real food. And what I would argue there is predominate towards the left-hand side of that plate, because this is where all of your nutrients are coming from. Now, the ones on the right do contain toxic compounds. This is why we want to limit them or completely remove them. And we can get more into this as we go along. But real foods are whole foods, free from grains and seed oils. Real foods are not, they don't contain grains. Grains aren't real foods, especially grains that we see today. They've been heavily hybridized and genetically modified. And seed oils, they're not real fats. These were used and invented many years ago, but they were used through the industry to fuel warships during I believe it was World War II. This industry was created, and then when the war ended,
Yeah.
well, there's an industry there that they need to sell this product, so they started putting it into food. They started this stuff is machine lubricant. You can run your diesel car on vegetable oils. Would you cook your food in diesel? And I think the answer to that is no. A resounding no. Do not cook your food in these compounds. Do not consume any compounds that contain these foods. And you'll be familiar with this graphic from Sacred Cow book, which I know you said you read last time, and the carnivore code on the right. And these are fantastic because these represent the nutrient density of animal proteins. Amino acids predominate in animal proteins. They're not found in high quantities in vegetables. And it's the same thing when we look at so-called superfoods like blueberries and kale compared to animal proteins. I won't go into this unless you want to come back to it later. But most of these nutrients that we believe are found in vegetables don't actually exist. And I'll give you one example. Just the first one on this, vitamin A. Vitamin A doesn't exist in plants. Vitamin A does not exist in plants. Plants contain a precursor called beta-carotene, which needs to be acted upon by an enzyme called BCMO to make it converted into the active form of retinol. Retinol is true vitamin A. Retinol does not exist in plants. Animal proteins contain high amounts of retinol. Vegetables and fruits are devoid, and you can see through that list, vitamin B down to D and so on, creatine, choline, carnitine, carnosine, all of these compounds heavily devoid in animal proteins. And just to summarize some of the things that I've put together there, and I'd like to get into more actionable takeaways now when we've come from this, but I thought this is important to highlight that these things that we feed our kids, even when we think that we're being healthy, they're not healthy. They contain toxic compounds, as we've just shown there. So the takeaways: drop the grains and seed oils, avoid non-foods. Typically anything in a shiny packet is not food. It's not food. Remember, there are only 2 aisles in the supermarket that contain food. And to be honest, I would argue one, which is the meat and fish aisle. But the vegetable and fruit aisle, it's better than processed foods. It's better than consuming grains. And there are reasons to limit vegetables, which we'll get into after this. But I think if you can make that start, then you're already on the correct path. Predominate animal proteins. Physically fill most of your plate, if not all of it, with animal proteins. And do not fear fat. Eat fat as nature intended. Eat animal proteins as nature intended. And eat until you're full. If possible, keep these compounds out of the home. If they're not there for your kids to consume, then your kids can't consume them. I would much rather see fruit at home than... And again, look, fruit is still a sugar. And I'm not disputing this, but I would rather see children eating berries than I would eating candy bars, chocolate bars, and packets of crisps, potato chips, whatever you want to call them, pizzas, and so on and so forth. Because to me, that is a step in the right direction. Use substitutes if you need to, so go for low carb alternatives. Go for things that are lectin free. They are out there, and that's what I do as a business. I supply many of these compounds because I try to support people along every way of their journey. Ideally, don't consume any of them. Just eat animal proteins. But these substitutes are there. Get lots of natural light, at least as and when you can. And also, the amino acid glutamine can also help blunt cravings. So if you add this to water and drink it, maybe not one for the kids, but this is one for maybe the adults who are suffering with sugar cravings, because I believe that our children look up to us. They are mini versions of ourselves. What we do has a massive impact on what they do. And even though we don't think it, we think that they're their own person, and they are, but they look up to us. And if they see us eating potato chips, or crisps as we call them in the UK, if they see us eating lots of fries, or if they see us eating lots of pizzas or candy bars, chocolate bars, sweets, then they are going to do the same thing because this has now become normalized. Well, my mommy and daddy consume these, so they must be good. So you need to make this step. You need to break that cycle, and I've given some incredible tips there in order to do so. I am a food addict. I'm a self-confessed sugar addict. I used to be clinically obese, as you know, type 2 diabetic. I suffered with chronic fatigue, depression, anxiety, arthritic pains, daily debilitating migraines would make me blind, and many others. I mean, we've got into this previously, but I've broken the cycle through implementing these things through education. And this brings me back to the main point that we made when we come on to this: education. I want to educate the listeners. You want to educate the listeners. Here is the information. What you do with it is up to you. But these are all the levers that you can pull. Make these changes yourself, and then the choices of your children will follow. They'll tie up to those decisions, and then we can all be a lot healthier and fitter moving forward. Yeah, that's my quick presentation. Apologies.
No, thank you so much for that, Richard. That was a fantastic presentation. So yeah, I've got a few points. UVA better than UVB. There's a reason why people like to watch the beautiful sunrise and the sunset and not go out in the day, right? I mean, there's this connection over there, I guess. Why you should see sunsets and sunrises, and people actually do that when they go out for vacations and stuff. They want to catch the sunrise or they want to catch the sunset, and they have this added advantage of getting the UVAs and getting the MSH rolling. Uh, Another thing I wanted to ask you, spoke a lot about insulin, right? Why do we not want insulin roaming around in our body? I mean, if you could elaborate on that, and then I'll come back to one really, really nice, interesting point after that.
Brilliant. So look, again, we're told that insulin is elicited to drive glucose into the cells. And yes, it does. But we need to think of this the other way around. It doesn't drive the nutrients into cells. It takes it out of circulation. It pulls it out of the blood to save your life. So insulin is expressed basically when we consume too much glucose. The role of insulin is fundamentally to drive amino acids into cells in order for us to heal, build, and repair, which we can elicit through things like alanine and leucine. So when we consume proteins, we elicit this response. So insulin is incredibly important. But what we don't want is this over elicitation of insulin. Many compounds in the body, cortisol, and we can get into this if you like as we go along. Cortisol and insulin have been demonized. We're told, these things are detrimental for us. These things are incredibly important, but within a set frame, if you like, within a set range. Now, what we don't want is the overexpression of these pathways. What happens when we consume excessive amounts of sugar is the pancreas will increase insulin more and more and more in order to drive more and more glucose into the cell. And this process occurs over 10 to 15 years. Behind the scenes, insulin is being increased. More insulin is being upregulated to keep the blood glucose down. So if we were to go to the doctor for a health check, the doctor typically tests blood glucose. Well, your blood glucose looks fine. I remember what I said about blood glucose. It needs to be out of the blood. We want to be in a set range. We don't want too much. Insulin is performing this action. So what the doctor's looking for is elevated glucose. But it isn't, because insulin keeps driving this down. More and more insulin keeps driving this glucose out of the blood into the cells, keeping that blood glucose down. But behind the scenes, insulin is increasing to the point where it can't work anymore. It doesn't function. Now, at this point, blood glucose begins to elevate. And again, blood glucose is toxic. Now we're diagnosed with pre-diabetes, and then eventually, soon after, diabetes. Now, we're in a case of now we need to start. Now the doctor sees this blood glucose rising, so now we're on medication in order to combat this excessive blood glucose. So the doctor prescribes us with insulin, and again, insulin is that compound that the pancreas makes naturally to drive the glucose out of the cell to keep those levels down. So we start injecting more insulin. And what did I say insulin does earlier? It tells the body to store fat. So we're and this is quite typical of type 2 diabetics that are insulin dependent. They start to gain fat everywhere, particularly around the midsection. And we're in this vicious cycle where it's a slippery slope where we need to consume more and more insulin to keep this blood glucose in check, because again, glucose is toxic to the body. But why don't we just stop consuming the sugar? why don't we just stop consuming the carbohydrates? Now our requirement for insulin is lower. Our requirement for insulin is less. Now we come out of this phase of being, this state of being insulin resistant. Now the body begins to heal and repair. Insulin resistance is incredibly damaging to the body. Excessive amounts of sugar is damaging to the body. Sugar will cause glycation end products, AGEs, advanced glycation end products, which basically causes cells to become sticky. This leads to things like cardiovascular disease. It's one of the main drivers. And seed oils is another driver also of cardiovascular disease, by the way, not saturated fats. As I'm sure you can jump on and add a lot more to that now. But the cells become sticky. They begin, in simple terms, they begin to act like Velcro. They begin to stick to things like in the eyes, and we start to get eye problems. Now we need to wear glasses and things. The vessels in the cells become sticky. It starts to glycate and oxidize LDL particles. And it's this glycation and oxidation of LDL particles which leads to cardiovascular disease. LDL isn't the enemy. And going slightly off topic with this, the liver ships out LDL. And LDL's job is to heal and repair the body. It travels through the body, dropping off lipid cargo in order to heal and repair our body. That's what LDL does. That doesn't sound damaging to me. In fact, it's essential for life. Then the LDL goes back to the liver where it's recycled and sent back out on its merry way again. But every one of these particles has an ApoB100 receptor. Every particle has one. It has one of them. But these particles become damaged through excessive glycation and oxidation, through too much sugar and through excessive amounts of seed oils. When this ApoB100 receptor is damaged, now the liver denies it access. It says no. And then these LDL particles build up within the bloodstream, within circulation. But it still tries to continue to do its job. So it finds damaged parts of the vessels, which is caused by sugar, by the way. Every time we consume sugar, we completely destroy our glycocalyx, which is the arterial wall's first line of defense. It takes 8 to 12 hours for the glycocalyx to recover. Sugar does this, glucose. And what do? Well, we're told to eat little and often. So at some point, we're grazers. That's what we're told to do. We're constantly causing damage to the glycocalyx. The glycocalyx is never recovering. And therefore, we're constantly causing damage to the arterial wall. And what happens is then these LDL particles will travel into the subendothelial space in order to heal and repair the damage that the glucose and the seed oils and things have caused. And when they're in there, in a healthy state, they heal and repair, and then they go on their merry way. But when they're damaged, they travel into the subendothelial space, and within the subendothelial space, there are cells called macrophages. These macrophages contain a scavenger receptor. This scavenger receptor recognizes the damaged ApoB100 receptor that the liver would not recognize. So now it opens up, this macrophage opens up the doors and says, come in. And it engulfs all of these damaged LDL particles, and then this macrophage grows into a foam cell, and it's this foam cell that is the start of an atherosclerotic plaque. Now we have problems. It wasn't caused by cholesterol. This doesn't happen in a healthy state. And remember, this comes back to sugar and seed oils. Sugar is what has caused the damage to the glycocalyx and damage to the arterial wall. Incredibly damaging to the human body. And that's just the start. It goes on deeper than that, which I'm sure you can elaborate on further.
Yeah, I mean, another thing that's really important for people to know is how insulin actually inhibits other hormones in our body, also, especially the growth hormone, right? So it affects the growth hormone receptor and brings down the growth hormone, which is really important for us anyway. So there are a lot of other even glucagon, right? It inhibits the work and the function of glucagon. They're both opposite hormones. Uh, and that is why I believe why insulin has such a short half life of just 4 to 6 minutes, right? I mean, your body's built in that way. It's like a defense mechanism. It's like an auto explode mechanism where it releases insulin to remove the blood sugar as quickly as possible. It should be done within 4 to 6 minutes, and within an hour, the insulin is out of the circulation, right? So if you keep having your sugar spikes and then your insulin spikes, and it's still remaining in your circulation, it's really going to affect the other hormones also, and lead to all different types of dysfunctions at every level. And that's what people need to understand, that we have these inbuilt defense mechanisms even for things that our body produces, right? And another point that I wanted to make was when you were talking about the seed oils, right? They're so important, and they're all made of, and they're basically seed oils and vegetable oils and refined oils. Trans fats are what people used to hear about, that they're the worst fats. And where do you get trans fats from? That's only from seed oils. Animal fats and saturated fats from animals don't convert into trans fats, right? So again, if you look at that from that angle, again, the saturated fats and the animal fats were always good for you, and these seed oils are the ones which convert to trans fats. And then to remove the trans fats, they added more things into the refined oils and the seed oils, uh, to make it maybe more palatable and smell a little better, and not do the harms that trans fats actually do. But then in return, they're actually causing probably double the harm by adding so many more chemicals into it, just so that we find that the food gets tastier, and looks better and smells better or whatever. But
It's
yeah,
interesting. I mean,
those are some points there.
yeah, and some fantastic points. And you just mentioned about adding of certain compounds to change the color and the smell. What gives the vegetable oil that color is peroxide, hair dye. The stuff that
Yeah.
people put on their hair to dye the hair is what gives that golden color. It doesn't come out that color. Typically, it comes out in a dark grey color, and it's incredibly smelly. You would not consume peroxide in any other time in your life in regard. This is a compound that you dye and bleach your hair with. So there's some food for thought there, isn't it? Pun intended.
Yeah,
Um,
no, no, no. I just remembered. So I went to watch Deadpool and Wolverine with a couple of friends last night, and at the interval they had this ad about heart healthy oil, and this brand which said that it was heart healthy refined oils, and they had three oils in that: rice bran, soybean oil, and canola oil. and
Three of the
and
most
all my
damaging.
friends just looked all my friends just looked at me, waiting for a response from me. I'm like, this is what they've done to us. It's mainstream cinema, where in the interval you're putting this ad out, where you have heart healthy oil, which has a combination of not one but three different seed oils, which are the worst ones possible, and they're marketing it as heart healthy, which is absolutely disgusting. They should actually be sued for that, but nobody's going to do that.
And that's exactly it. It's mainstream media. It's absolutely everywhere. And the reason that we're told that they're heart healthy is that it lowers our cholesterol. And that we're told that cholesterol is the demon. Cholesterol is essential for life. We can't live without
Yeah.
cholesterol. It's essential for cell formation, cell communication, nutrient absorption, nutrient transportation, the production of hormones, and it's essential for healing. If you were to test your cholesterol on one day and then become sick and test it after you've been sick, your cholesterol comes down because it's going to work in order to heal and
Yeah.
repair your body. Now, why would you want your reserves of this compound to be lower? Because there's less to fight off that virus or infection. We don't want it to be lower. So the whole premise that low cholesterol is good for us is a fallacy. There is maybe no ideal, and this is something we discussed on the last show, isn't it? That
Yeah.
everyone has different levels, but LDL is protective, but cholesterol is essential. Cholesterol makes the brain. It's essential for the myelin sheath, which sends signals through the body. And again, every cell is made of cholesterol. It's essential for life. Now, what these seed oils do is they artificially lower our cholesterol because it looks so similar to human cholesterol that the body stops producing cholesterol. This is
Producing
how
it.
it
Yeah.
lowers it. Now we suffer with problems because now we don't have enough cholesterol to fight off viruses and infections. We don't have enough cholesterol to synthesize vitamin D when we're hit by UVB rays, because this is what cholesterol does. When UVB hits the skin, cholesterol goes to work to create and synthesize vitamin D to act as a sunscreen. So, and this is why we don't burn. You and I don't burn as much. When I was consuming seed oils, I would burn in the sun, and my skin would peel. Now I'm no longer consuming these, and I consume lots of saturated fats. I don't suffer with this issue. And again, it just comes back to as nature intended. Eat as nature intended. Don't consume these industrial seed oils. On what planet or process of thinking is something that is man-made ever going to be better for you than as nature intended? It
Yeah.
just doesn't make sense.
And who knows what the actual cholesterol level is supposed to be? I mean, everybody is different. There was a time when I think the cholesterol levels used to be 350 or 360, something like that was the standard. They said, yeah, anything up to 360 is okay. Then it came down to 300, then came down to 200. It just doesn't make sense because they just look at the averages of the population, and the population is sick anyways. But so I think it's just an arbitrary number that people have just picked out, and they want to sell more statins just to bring it down, which doesn't make sense. But yeah, I mean, and this was a discussion I was doing with a couple of friends last night itself, where they were asking, what's the ideal number for cholesterol? I'm like, as high as possible.
Is it?
you,
Yeah.
you you want that? You want high cholesterol, not low cholesterol, because it's like your inbuilt antioxidant, probably, if you want to call it that. But yeah, this. I mean, you're right. I mean, we need to put out as much of the educative materials out there for the people to look at and read up and listen to, and then make a decision as to what they actually want to do with their lives and with their kids, and what they want to feed their kids. It comes down to that. I mean, you want your progeny to be as healthy as possible and live as long as possible and live a healthy long life.
Yeah, 100%. And apologies, I was trying to find something that was just tying into what you said. I wonder if I can find it. So, I mean, we mentioned cardiovascular disease. Do you mind if I share quickly again, Ankur?
Please,
Is
please
that all
do,
right?
please do.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, I'll share. I'll just show you this because this is something else that I put together. So, look, this is so you just said now that we consume more vegetable oils than ever before. Our range of cholesterol has come down, so we're doing all the things that we're told to do. So if that were true, if these saturated fats were responsible for cardiovascular disease and we were consuming more heart healthy seed oils, then cardiovascular disease would come down. But it hasn't. It hasn't come down. In fact, if we were to look at this over from the start of this graph, I think it was 1990 up to 2019, there's been a 5.5% increase in cardiovascular disease. And I have also accounted for the extra in birth. So basically in population, this is accounted for within there. So that doesn't sound like much, but that's over 1 million more cardiovascular events within that time compared to prior periods. So as a percentage, it sounds small, but it really isn't. And that I have accounted for increase in population in that. And I'm sure that you can probably find studies and things that will show far higher. But we're doing everything that we're told to do. We're doing everything that we're told to do. These vegetable oils are detrimental to our health. And interestingly, it's if you were to Google a condition called cytosterolemia, and you're probably familiar with this. I don't know if you want to type it in, or anybody listening now. SITO sterolemia, as you say it. If you were to search on your internet search engine for this, it's a condition, a genetic condition or inherited, which causes the body's inability to remove phytosterols, basically seed oils. So our body is trying to remove these compounds because they're detrimental to our health. And the body tries to keep around 2% within the body. It tries to limit this because any higher is detrimental. But we're told the opposite. We're told that these vegetable oils reduce risk of cardiovascular disease. Now, for anyone who has Googled cytosterolemia, they will see that it is a condition in which their body loses the ability to excrete that toxin, and it leads to a massive increase in premature heart disease. So on one hand, we're told that the vegetable oils reduce cardiovascular disease, but in black and white, that condition, cytosterolemia, in which our body cannot release or remove that compound, it increases cardiovascular disease. Both of those can't be true. So who's lying to us?
Uh-huh.
This is a known condition. I don't know if you've got it on your screen there, but it'd be interesting to see what it says. But it's
Yeah,
there
I
in
do.
black
I'm
and
going to
white.
share my screen. Yeah, just give me a sec.
Scary stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, there. Can you see that?
Cytosterolemia, I can see it.
There is an inherited condition that can lead to premature heart disease and other complications characterized by excess accumulation of plant sterols in the blood. Yep. Yeah, it's
I
all
mean, it's
there.
there in black and white. You know, it's and you
Yep.
didn't have to look hard for
And
that.
if you look at this, yeah, you look at this graphic, it's got atherosclerosis over here. Cytosterolemia is a condition in which fatty substances from vegetable oils, nuts, and other plant based foods accumulate in the blood and tissues.
And that's not something you needed to
Yep.
troll through hours to find. It's there in black and white.
Yeah. Perfect, man.
There in
So
black and
far,
white.
I think let's give out a few messages and a few key points, takeaways for the parents who really want to give good foods to their kids. And I would start off with remove all junk foods from your homes and remove all processed foods. Don't normalize junk foods for them. Why don't you make the next point and then we'll take one each, maybe.
Yeah, it's I completely agree. I think that that's going to be the first step. We know that those foods are not good for us. It isn't normal, you know, it shouldn't be normal to reward our children with takeaways and with food. These, no, think of it this way. If I were to give my little girl a can of cola or whatever it was, I know what damage this causes to the body. I don't consume it because I know how damaging it is. But what people will quite often say is, well, a little bit doesn't hurt. So, well, go and drink this. This is my concoction. It contains rat poison. There's this much rat poison in there. But the rest of it is full of vitamins and minerals, stevia, and it tastes. This is the nicest tasting drink you've ever had in your life. You're going to drink this and you'll never want to drink anything else. But it contains this much rat poison. Would you drink it? You wouldn't drink it. I wouldn't drink it. Would you give that to your children knowing that it had rat poison in there? No. Yet, you'll quite
Yeah.
happily give them a can of soda or all of these other compounds which are detrimental to your health. It's not a case of, oh, a little bit doesn't hurt. These compounds are detrimental. Vegetable oils stay in circulation for as much as 5 years, causing oxidative stress. If you don't know what oxidative stress is, a quick Google search and it will scare you. This is something that happens in the body that causes lots of damage. You do not want oxidative stress. You do not want advanced glycation end products. Why would you feed your child a little bit of rat poison? And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, let's hope that knocks home a bit.
Yeah, I mean that just reminds me. Your rat poison just reminds me that I think there was a lawsuit against PepsiCo where somebody had found a lizard or a rat. I'm not sure in their cola, and the company said that this can't be true. They actually went out. I think either they won the case or they did an out of court settlement. But they said that this can't be true because from the time that the cola was bottled till the time this person actually apparently or allegedly found a lizard was long enough for the lizard to get dissolved in the cola. They said if it they said if the lizard was there, it would have got dissolved.
Wow. And we're drinking this. We drink, yeah,
Yeah.
well, you and I don't, but, and this is exactly what I mean. Why would you give your child this toxic compound that can dissolve a rat or a lizard? I mean, think about it sensibly. Coming away
Yeah.
from the sugar and everything else, these compounds are man-made, and they are compounds. They're not anything of nutritional value. We shouldn't be normalizing treats. That's the other thing. Oh, it's a treat. Oh, well, use some rat poison. Go and give your daughter or son a treat. You know, this is the nicest tasting drink in the world, remember? Go and give them a treat. You know, you wouldn't do it, yet it's normalized because it's on every street corner. It's up to you and I to make that change. It's up to you and I to make that difference. It's up to you and I to educate everybody else, and then they become that pebble in the pond. They can start to educate their children. We shouldn't have to conform. We're not sheep. Don't be a sheep. Don't do it just because everybody else is doing it. These compounds are absolutely detrimental.
Yeah. What are your other final points where about which the parents should keep in mind? You know about what to give and what not to give to the kids.
So I think, look, coming back to those incremental changes, this is a scale for me. You and I are right on the other end. You know, we're carnivore. So, you know, for the sake of the viewers and the people watching, the listeners, you and I would quite happily eat a plate of steak, a plate of beef, or, you know, or whatever, or lamb, or whatever your animal protein of choice is. You know, I understand that isn't for everybody. Even if you're a fish eater and all you eat is fish, You're not, for very, very few people, eating nothing but fish sounds boring. I eat lamb every day, and I love eating lamb. I never get bored of it, but I understand that this is an extremity. Beef, eggs, fish, cheese, whatever your animal protein of choice is, it does seem extreme. But we need to prioritize animal proteins. And that could just be even adding in eggs. Eggs are highly nutrient dense. Even if it's cheese, does contain compounds which can cause issues, but is far more nutrient dense than vegetables. We need to increase animal proteins. We should try to predominate animal proteins on our plate and understand that this is where the nutrients are coming from. So animal proteins should be prioritized. Any vegetables we want to keep to a minimum. Again, as that graphic that I showed earlier illustrated, a quarter of the plate at most. None, if we can. It is normal to eat nothing but meat. This is how we've evolved our entire evolutionary period. We're meat eaters. But as you say, begin by removing, these toxic compounds in regards to processed foods, the sugary treats, the drinks, the takeaways. Eat real food, predominant animal proteins. Eat the veg that grows above the ground if you have to. Ideally, don't do that either. But avoid the grains, avoid the vegetable oils, and just try to prioritize animal proteins. I think that's the biggest thing that I can do there.
Yeah.
You hit the nail on the head also, earlier. Don't keep these things at home. If they're not there, then your child can't consume them. If they're not there, you can't consume them. If you wake up at 2 a.m. and you have a craving, well, you can't eat what you don't have. Put other things in there, fill up on your animal proteins. Use berries or fruits if you need to. Yes, they do contain lots of sugar, but I would rather see that than eating sweets and chocolates and things. But make these incremental changes. This needs to be sustainable. But if you do fall off the wagon, or your child goes to someone's house and they are fed whatever, we can only do what we can do. So what goes into your child's body is in your control when they're at home. So make sure that they're fed highly nutrient dense foods there, because the second they leave the door, they may be in an environment in which you no longer have control. So just control what you can. If you fall off the wagon, don't beat yourself up about it. Just dust yourself off. This is all about the rule and not the exception. Consistency is key. So just jump straight back on it. Get back to eating real food. And I think that's the best takeaway that I can give is real food. And animal proteins are real food.
Yeah, I think you got that right, man. Consistency is always the key. But thank you so much for all the insights that you've given today, Rich. As always, it's been a pleasure to have you on the Desi project. I'm going to add on to how people can listen to you and catch you online. I have the whole list, which I'll put in the show notes.
Fantastic. Brilliant stuff. Pleasure chatting as always. Do you want me to run through those locations, or do you just pop them in below?
I'll put them in. I'll put them
Yeah,
in.
perfect
I
stuff.
already got them. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. My
Awesome,
man,
man. Yep.
pleasure as always. Absolute pleasure. Looking forward to the next one that we're going to be doing on cholesterol. If we can, there's a
Yeah.
few other guests that we're looking to organise there, but brilliant chatting. Thanks again for the
Yeah.
invitation. I thoroughly enjoyed, as always.
Always, man. Yep. Take care.